Hey friends, Kevin here, and I did a video recently about sleeping in your van, places you can sleep in your van while you're traveling. But there were a couple of surprises, I think, for you in there, but a lot of that was common sense. But today, they should, most if not all, be surprises for you because we're going to look at some really obscure, really strange places you can sleep in your minivan, camper van, little RV, whatever it is you're using to go be a nomad and do van life with. So let's get straight into these and why they may or may not work for you. Small town airports. Now, I'm not talking about airports in big cities because they're going to charge you $20 a night to park a car. I'm talking about the little airfields that aren't even open all the time. But around those, usually a lot of times there's nothing going on. So you can get by in a pinch with parking at one of those little community airports, airstrips. And as long as you have a halfway decent vehicle, nobody's probably going to say anything to you. Nobody's going to think twice about it. They're just going to think that you're one of the people that had a plane there and you flew it somewhere. Another place to park your van overnight to sleep in, carpool lots, rideshare lots. I think the state of Virginia, I'll post this down below if I can find it again. They've even got a site that lists all of these throughout the state. And again, if I'm something like that that's full up, I'm not going to sneak in there and take somebody's space that somebody that's working needs to park their car and be able to do this, to have an alternate way to work. But most of these that I have ever run across, they are nowhere near being full. Sometimes there's room for 40 cars or 20 cars, and there's only one or two there or four. So if I grab a space, I'm not taking anything away from anyone, which I would not want to do. Courthouses and police stations. Now, if you don't like the police, you can pretty much skip this one, but I have no problem with it. I have been at towns with festivals, and once everybody departed late at night in a downtown area, maybe this is something that goes on for a couple of days, and I want to be there the next day when something opens, I have no problem with going ahead. And sometimes you have some residential stuff around it, but I've never been bothered. I will go ahead and I will pull in, at the side of the courthouse, whatever. I've never had any problem doing it. So take that for what it's worth. Police stations, if I was in a bind, I would have no problem pulling into a police station. I would have no problem calling or even walking in there and asking for permission if it was just some weird situation. And in smaller towns, counties, I'm sure they're going to say, hey, go ahead, man, it's fine. It's not something I would want to make a habit of, but I would have no problem with doing it. Obvious one before we get back into the more obscure stuff are rest areas. This varies by state. I did a whole video on this. And some states are fine with you spending the night. Some states have limits. They don't want you there more than 4 hours. They don't want you there completely overnight. And you're just going to have to play by whatever rules that state has. Or if you choose to chance it, understand that you may get a knock on the door when you don't want it, depending on how often the local police, state police, probably because they're on interstates, is patrolling that particular area. So again, if I'm in a state that just isn't real friendly with overnight parking for a rest area, for a rest stop, I'm simply not going to do it. I'm going to go find somewhere else because I don't want to be awakened during the night. I don't want to have to move. I enjoy my beauty sleep. More towards larger cities again, which I generally try to avoid, but I have done this before, what they call business areas, industrial areas, where you have a lot of factories, where you have a lot of trucks going in and out. They tend to be on the back streets And again, you're just going to have to use your own judgment for this, because some of these are okay, and some of them are they're just a little iffy. Some of these areas can be a little sketchy. And if you pull in and they look sketchy and you see people wandering around that worry you, leave. Because some are fine, some aren't. I can't tell you. You're going to have to use your own judgment. But if you do this, get out of the main way. Don't be parked directly in front of somebody's business. Move on down the street a little bit. A lot of these businesses, they have their little lanes that go into their lane or their warehouse, and then often they'll have a fence area, and sometimes that fenced area may be covered with something so you can't see it. That's where you want to be. You want to be a few spots down, out of everyone's way, to where nobody is really going to pay attention to you. And again, the setup of your van is going to determine how easy this is going to be. If you have, 4 bicycles and 8 other things hanging off of your van, it's going to be harder. That's just the way it is. Whereas like my minivan, I try to keep as stealth as possible and no one pays attention to it. But these are all decisions, again, that you're going to have to make, or decide which places are going to be better depending on how you have designed your little nomadic van. Another option is church parking lots. Now, I see people mention this stuff all the time, and they're talking about calling ahead, and I'm just laughing at this because, again, I'm in rural areas. Unless you're in some pretty good sized places, they aren't going to have people there all day long. They tend to only have people there on days that they have church, which often is like a Wednesday and a Sunday. They're not running full-time secretaries and staff that are there 40 hours a week. So I think a lot of this stuff that people put out there sometimes is they're just dreaming, or they're repeating what somebody else said, and it's just not that way in the real world. But in a more country area, more rural area, I have no problem staying in, off to the side in a church parking lot. Generally, nobody's going to bother me. Where you have an exception to that is going to be if you're out a little bit and you have a church that you see and you have a house sitting near it. Because often that house is going to be the parsonage for that church. And if that's the only thing in that little area, and when they look out and they see some stranger parked over there, especially in a van, and more especially if you look a little sketchy, they are probably going to come over and check on you. That doesn't mean they won't let you stay, but they're probably going to check on you. Hotels. Not my favorite, not something I specifically go and look to do, but it is something that I know a lot of people that have success with that I've talked to. Now, again, this is going to not work well in your big cities, which have, paid parking, which have parking garages, all of that kind of thing. But when you get out into your smaller cities and your small towns, hotels are around as long as they're not full up. You're not putting anybody out if you grab a space over at the side or the end of the parking lot. And in general, people aren't going to pay attention to it. What you do want to be mindful of is, on your quick little drive through the parking lot, make sure that there aren't some kind of hang tags or things on the dashboard to where they have made people register their vehicles. But again, in smaller places, that very seldom happens. You're not going to have a problem. This is something that, if I was doing this, it would be because I was out traveling late and I jumped off the road and I just didn't have a lot of good options. And yes, I may jump in there and do it for a night. It's not something I'm personally going to make a habit of, but it can work. Hospitals. Hospitals can work. Now, understand though, with hospitals, it depends on how much traffic is going to bother you. It depends on how big that hospital parking lot is and can you get over to the side. And I've seen where some of these people recommend, oh yeah, you want to be right there at the ER. Well, first of all, I don't want to be at the ER. I don't want the traffic and the ambulances and people running in and out of there all night past me. So that's not the way I'm going to do it. I'm not trying to freeload. I'm trying to find some peace and quiet. So I am certainly not going to take up a spot that may be needed by someone coming in there or someone's family coming in there. So parking in front of the ER is not the way I'm going to do it. Do these places get patrolled? Some do, some don't. It just depends on how big the hospital is. But I don't plan on staying there for 3 days or a week. I'm not trying to live there. I'm just trying to find a place to spend the night, and it may be more convenient for me because I'm tired than driving somewhere else, or the next day there's something in the area I'm in that I want to get up and do or see. So I'm just looking for that place to get me through the night, and parked over out of the way in a hospital parking lot, that is one way to potentially do it. Kind of along those same lines are adult care places or nursing homes, or adult care places at least that are 24 hours, because they tend to have certain times, and after that, late in the evening, at night, up through the next morning, the only people that are going to be parked around in that lot basically are some employees, the employees that work there all night. So you're not going to be putting anybody out. You're not going to be in anybody's way. A lot of times they're in areas that are pretty remote, pretty quiet. You're just not going to have a lot of traffic and stuff coming by. So it is, again, in a pinch, when you're out, you're stuck, you're traveling late, whatever it is, it's something to have in your arsenal of places to think about that certainly are a potential for you to be able to sleep in your van one night. We mentioned courthouses and police stations I have had no problems with. Another option in some areas is going to be fire stations. A lot of times they have a lot of space. They have a lot of areas around them. Obviously, you don't want to be anywhere in front of those big doors if something happens. And understand that there's the chance of, if you're parked at one of those, that at 3 o'clock in the morning, obviously, it can get really noisy really fast. So if you're okay with that, that's fine. Again, this is not something I want to do in a city or a larger town where probably every night, at least once, they're going to have to go out on a call. But in smaller areas, smaller towns, more rural things, it's absolutely fine because, the odds are in your favor that they won't actually have to go out on a call tonight. And I have no problem, going and talking to whoever's there, unless it's too late. If it's, if it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I try not to be out looking for a place that late, but things do happen depending on where I am and what I'm doing that day, that it would, in which case I'm not going to bother with asking for permission or any of that stuff. I'm just going to get out of the way, and I'm going to do it. But again, understand there is a little bit of a chance of someone coming up and knocking on your door and see what you're doing. But in general, if you're out of the way, nobody's going to pay attention to you if you're doing it once. If they see you there 2 or 3 days in a row, yeah, you're going to have problems. But for a one night stand in van life, looking for a place to sleep, it's fine. And then we come to one of the best, and especially, I think this is a great ideal if you have a little caravan, if you are with someone else in another vehicle, and there's 2 or 3 of you or whatever. In smaller towns, especially out west, it's no problem, is staying at abandoned businesses. When it's obvious that business has been closed down for 20 years or more, why not just pull over and stay there? And a lot of times you're in a small town, you're not going to have a lot of traffic, people aren't going to be out late. They're really not going to pay that much attention to you. Bonus, and especially in a little downtown area, downtown street areas, if you're anywhere near an auto parts store, people are just going to assume that you're there because you need something out of the auto parts store the next day. So most people aren't going to even think twice about it. They're going to notice you're from out of the area, and their first thought's going to be, oh, he needs a part, he needs a radiator hose, he needs something. That's why he's there for the night. You're not bothering anybody. So it can work out really well. And all of these things I'm talking about, let me know. I know a lot of people talk about stealth camping, and, you know, they're trying to go into some place at midnight and they're trying to leave at 5 in the morning before anybody gets there. Let me let you on a little secret here. I am not a morning person. I don't want to be up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So, and having to get out and drive and go find somewhere else to be. So I avoid anything that's possibly going to put me in that situation. I'm not trying to beat anybody out of anything. I'm not trying to be that hidden in that stealth from things. So places I recommend and the way to do it is places that I want to be able to be there until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes later if I choose to, until I decide to go start my day and do whatever research I'm doing and whatever adventuring that I'm going to go do in that area that day. Now, of course, we would hope that all of us are out every night and we're in some beautiful campground somewhere and we're in that beautiful spot by the lake and we're nowhere near anybody else, or we're camped out in the desert looking at the beautiful scenery on our own. But here's reality. It doesn't always work out that way. Especially when you're traveling places you have never been before. And you're fighting weather, and you're fighting when things are open and when things are closed down that you want to go see. And all these different scenarios that maybe you're out too long enjoying a hike somewhere, and now, you know, it's gotten late and you need to drive to the next area, and, you know, you're at dark. If you're doing this stuff anywhere near the winter time, remember at the worst point in December, it's going to be dark at about 20 after 5. And even into January, it's going to be dark by 6 o'clock, 6:15, even in late January, early February. So on those short days, you know, you're going to run out of daylight. A lot of people don't like driving after dark for obvious reasons. So these are potential ideals that can help you out. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you personally have done any of these. And now that you've seen these videos, and I have another one coming of some even more obscure stuff that I have done from time to time, but go ahead and put your ideals down below if you have a thought of something that I haven't covered yet, because you may have an ideal that I have never even thought of or haven't even tried yet. So more good van life stuff coming soon. Everybody stay safe.